everybody, and welcome to the channel Crossing the Spiritual Streams. My name is Tandra, and today we're going to continue our video series on how to read tarot cards, the basics anyway. And today we're going to be covering the Suit of Swords. But before we get started on that, I'd just like to remind you all to subscribe to this channel if you have not done so yet. Also hit the bell icon so that you can be notified of future videos when they come out. Check out our other videos on the channel. We have a lot of timeless tarot card readings, as well as other videos on other spiritual topics that might interest you. If you can share the video with your friends and family, that would be awesome. And also, if you could give the video a thumbs up, that's really useful to the channel. All of those things help YouTube share this channel with other people and let them also see things as well. If you'd like to donate to the channel, there will be a link in the description to PayPal. And let's get started. Okay, so swords. The swords cards, generally, they correspond to the suit of spades in a regular playing card set, and they are the suit of air, which I always found kind of odd for swords and spades, because when you think of swords, you think of aggressive type of things or fighting and that kind of stuff, and then also if you think of spades, whenever I think of a spade, I think of a shovel. So I always kind of thought of earthly stuff, but it's not, it's air. And so the only way to kind of help me always remember that is, when you do your sword, swishing it through the air kind of thing. So since it represents air, it represents your mind, okay? Because ideas come out of the air, basically. They reach your mind, so it's your intellect. But it does also deal with aggression and that kind of thing. If you think about it, if you have swords and you're off fighting, that shows an aggression. It deals a lot, though, with your mind, your ideas, your intellect, that kind of thing. It also deals with your attitudes about things, how you think about things, or what your point of view is, basically, and your beliefs. And so all those things have to do with your mind. They have to do with the way you think about things. And then it also has to do with your knowledge, your power. It also deals with a lot of change and conflict. When we go through the individual cards, you'll notice that a lot of them deal with some sort of conflict or resolving of a conflict or dealing with a conflict or a big change happening. They do correspond to the suits of Libra, Aquarius, and Gemini in astrology, because those are the air signs. Okay, so just an example here of the different swords. Like all other suits, they have however number of swords, usually represented by the number on the card. And then they usually try to have symbolism that might symbolize what the card means, but some don't, as we talked about in the past, so it just depends. Like you notice the traditional one here, this is the Four of Swords, and it's showing these swords, kind of going down at somebody who's on his crypt. And so, that's the kind of the aggression kind of thing going on there. So you can almost see that in a lot of these cards. Or like this one's kind of got a desolate winter kind of motif going on. Or then this one, it looks like she's preparing her swords for war and that kind of thing. So it deals a lot with your aggression. Okay, so we're going to talk about the Ace of Swords specifically. The Ace of Swords deals with, like all aces, it's a new beginning and a new start. So this would be your beginning of an idea, or a new idea that just come up into your head, or a new breakthrough, or your vision, because remember, it all has to do with your mind. It also could deal with force or a focus, because it's like one focus point. Also, it's interesting with this card, you can cut through deception. Because remember, this has to do with your ideas and the way, your point of view and the way you think about things, or how things are going through your mind. So the Ace of Swords, you can cut through any kind of fogginess that might be there with it. It also deals with new possibilities, because it is the new card, and clarity of thought. So like I said, these all have to do with your thought and how you're thinking about things and those kinds. Okay, so now the example of the Ace, as usual. It usually has the sword actually up in the air, like a lot of the traditional ones. Like this one has a hand with the sword being held out in the air. This one's up in the air and there's a eagle flying near it, that kind of thing. And that kind of represents the air or the mind. But it's interesting because this particular set actually has it in the earth, which is kind of weird. But it's going straight down. But as you can tell, the person here that's sitting here contemplating, they are thinking, they are contemplating. It also has the owl symbolism, which would also show your intellect, or wise thoughts, that kind of thing. So whenever you have different ones, as usual, you know, there might be different symbolism, whatever the artist had in mind when they were thinking about it. But other than that, there's not a ton of symbolism. You notice how these actually have crowns on them, so you kind of think of a crown being on your head, and that's where your thoughts and ideas come from. So that might kind of have a lot to do with the symbolism there. But otherwise, there's not generally a lot of symbolism on the Ace of Cards. Okay, the Two of Swords. Now, twos often deal with coming together or pair or that kind of thing, but it also could deal with, in this case, especially since it's the Swords cards, it can actually deal with difficult choices, two choices to deal with. You might go this way, you might go that way. It also might deal with a stalemate. So if there's been an aggression going on, you know, two people have opposing sides and now there's a stalemate. Could also mean denial or hidden information. So where the one, you could cut through deception, kind of go through that way. The two is now hiding things from you. It's now making it harder for you to see what's coming forward. It also might mean indecision, which kind of goes along with your difficult choices. So if you have two different choices, you might not know which way to go. You're just not sure what path to take. It also might be the fact that you might be stuck in limbo. So that kind of deals with preventing us from making a decision or having indecision. We're just kind of stuck. We're just not sure where to go. Now, this does usually have symbolism that helps represent what the card means. In the traditional Rider-Waite deck, it usually has a woman with two swords crossed and a blindfold on. I think that kind of represents the not seeing clearly. It also, with the two swords, I think that represents the indecision or the two paths that can be taken. In this one, she looks like she's almost in agony over deciding. This one, she kind of looks a little bit more resolved. Whenever I see these cards, though, another thing that I also kind of get out of it is because they have the blindfold on, that it might be time to look inward to make that decision, or it might be time to focus more inward than outward, because when you have a blindfold on, you can't see outward, and so now it's time to look more inward, and that might help you make the decision that you need to make. You notice in this deck, though, they actually are showing two people in a stalemate. They are fighting. They're fighting over this acorn, but they both have an equal purchase on it, and they, you know, basically they're not going to be able to. Nobody's going to be able to overpower the other at this point. So that kind of shows the stalemate version of what the card means, more so than the indecision or the difficult choices kind of to be made. So once again, artists can make different choices as to how they represent different things. Okay, the Three of Swords. Now, threes to me often usually deal with groups or with creativity and that kind of thing, but in the sword suit, they're slightly different. I don't know if you'll notice, but a lot of the swords cards seem to have what some people might consider a negative connotation to them. All cards have positive and negative energies to them no matter what, but it seems like the swords have push a little bit more that way for their initial meanings in a lot of ways. And in the Three of Swords, it often can mean heartbreak, separation, sadness, grief, and sorrow, upset, loss, traumas, all those kinds of things. It also can mean you have power to harm and cause pain, or that there's suffering meant to make us stronger. So if you think about it, if you are suffering because of the Three of Swords, that suffering is actually leading to something better or to help make us stronger. If you think about it, if you get a cut on your arm, let's say, and then when it heals back over, it scars over, that scar tissue is tougher and stronger than the original skin was originally. So yes, there's a scar there, but it's also tougher in a lot of ways. So if you think about it, that's kind of the symbolism behind the Three of Swords. So it just deals with a lot of that kind of breakup and conflict. And this card, the traditional drawing of this card always kind of puts me on edge whenever I see it. But it's usually a heart symbol with three swords piercing through the heart. So it's a very much, you see it, you instantly know, okay, it's obviously you got stabbed in the heart. You're feeling, lots of, hardships, breakup, that kind of thing. And it showed a lot in these cards. Now this particular one has a slightly different notation to it. The swords, once again, are pointed directly down into the ground, but there's owls and crows and things on top. So I think this kind of might symbolize a little bit more of, okay, you've grown stronger, you're wiser through whatever conflict or whatever has arisen, whatever has you've gone through, you're now wiser and stronger from it. But also kind of the raven here might kind of show the loss that you might have endured through that too. Okay, the Four of Swords. Now the Four is kind of interesting. Fours are usually a foundational kind of energy, more stable, that kind of thing. So once we get to the Four, it does represent where you get to relax, you have a little bit more of rest, more peace. So you went through the trauma of the Three and whatever conflict and just horribleness of whatever went on there. So now you're able to kind of rest, relax, regroup, get a little bit more peace. It's also more protection. The fight's ended, you're done now. It's time to retreat, take a rebreather, rejuvenate. So back off from everything that's happened from the 1 through the 3. The 2s and 3s, the 2 is kind of the indecision, possibly a stalemate conflict. The 3 is just, things have just really blown up and just, really been bad, horrible trauma. And then now it's like, okay, time to back off, time to rest now. And the symbolism there is a little bit harder to see sometimes. And so I interpret these cards differently, once again, by the pictures, but maybe even differently than what the traditional meanings might say, depending on the pictures. Like, for instance, this one, okay, they're definitely doing the rest, relaxation, they're retreating. Of course, they're also on a coffin, so basically they're dead. So, it's kind of like, well, they're definitely at peace now. They're done. But, so that's what the symbolism's all about, is like, okay, yeah, they've gone through all the, and it's now, they don't have to fight anymore. It's done, basically. And that's kind of symbolized here a little bit too, because she's kind of putting the swords away and everything, so it kind of might mean a retreat, a relaxation, but also to me, it almost seems like it's a preparation for war, like she's getting things together and ready to go off to war, even though it's supposed to be more of a rest, relaxation, stop, regroup kind of energy to it. Sometimes when I see this one, it's almost like they're getting ready for a battle, which is, slightly different than the original interpretation. And then this one too, they're still in the throes of winter. And so yes, they're kind of resting and all that, and they do have some, honeycombs and other things here. And so maybe it's kind of a restful period, but you get the idea that in this particular card, they're not quite through all the conflict yet. They're not quite done with everything that's going on, because they're still in the throes of winter. So, just depends on the artist's thing. Okay, the Five of Swords. Now, fives are almost always a conflict change type of card anyway, and in the swords, it's definitely that. Definitely going on, because it deals with arguments and disputes and bullying and conflict, hostility, stress, revenge even. So, I mean, even more, kind of taking it that one step farther. You might have lost the big picture at this point. And you might actually have too much ambition, because remember, this is a kind of an ambition type oriented suit. And so once you get up to the 5, it's halfway between the 1 and the 10. So you might be pushing forward too much. You might have too much ambition at this point. So the 5s definitely deal with a lot of conflict and change and all that. And so, all of that hostilities and everything that the sword suit kind of can symbolize is definitely symbolized in the 5. And these cards are different in a lot of ways of what they're showing, and so it lends itself to interpretation slightly differently, which is really good. I kind of like that. The traditional one is somebody is winning or has won a battle or fight, it looks like, because they're walking away with several of the swords. The others have laid down their swords and walking away, kind of retreating. So that kind of shows the conflict that has gone on, the big battle, the big fight. So this one's kind of, to me, it's almost like the battle's in the past. Like it's already been fought and won, possibly. This one shows the swords up in the air, because, there's the air sign, and it has hummingbirds and butterflies and other dragonflies, those kinds of things, up in the air. And so this one's almost more of a happier symbolism to me when I see it. Because even though 5 can deal with a lot of conflict and stress, I might see it as, okay, yeah, you've gone through, you're in the throes of change, maybe in some stressful situations, but there's some good things coming out of that, some positive, cheerful kind of energy. This one, it's also showing them coming back from the battle, but you notice it's not just one kind of being victorious with others hanging their head. It's kind of several of them coming back from the battle. They're wounded. They're coming back. It looks like, yeah, they've got some extra swords here, so they may have won the battle, but they definitely have suffered some losses there because of it. So once again, the symbolism might be slightly different on each one, just depending on where you're going there. Okay, we get to the 6 now, and 6s being the even numbers tend to be a little bit more settled, a little less turmoil going on. And so when you've gotten to the 6 now, okay, you went through the big conflict of the 5, the big battle, the big fight, and so now you're ready to move on. You're leaving things behind. So kind of even the symbolism of the past 5 there, where they're walking away from the battle now. Now you've moved on to your 6. You're walking away from all of that went on. It's time to get some distance between you and the situation, whatever's going on. You have suffered some loss, but now you're going forward from that. You might be leaving a stressful workplace, because remember the 5 is a big stress type of card possibly. You're now getting your stability back again, and you're moving away from the struggles that you've had of the 5 card. Okay, and the traditional showing of this is they're on a boat. They're moving away. All the swords are down in the boat, kind of stuck into the boat, but they're paddling away from that. So it's kind of showing, yeah, there's been battle and all these swords have come at you, but you've been able to get away from it. You're able to move on from that. It did not kill you. Sometimes it shows like a family, like a mother, son, or something. Depends on the card, but sometimes it shows that. But they're getting away from that battle, that strife, that struggle. This one, too, he's got arrows slung at him. They're coming straight at him, but he's getting on his boat. He's getting away from what's happening to him. So this one is a little bit more of the conflict may still be on rising, ongoing, still happening, but he's getting ready to shove off and get away from that conflict. So this one to me is a little bit more imminent than these, or kind of like it's over with. So pictures are useful that way. Okay, the 7 of Swords. Now 7s being kind of like the 5s, as we've talked about before. The 7s are a little bit more spiritual than the 5s, but they usually still deal with conflict and that kind of thing. And so in the 7 of Swords specifically, it deals a lot with lies and trickery and scheming, but it also might deal with strategy and cunning. So a little bit more on the positive side. You can give good strategy, good smarts towards, because it is the intellectual, it is the mind, it is coming up with your ideas kind of suit. So it's helpful that way for you to do that. You could be very resourceful. You might be getting away with something when this pops up. So if this pops up in a reading, it might be that you're doing something that maybe you shouldn't, but you're actually getting away with it because nobody knows you've done it. And that deals kind of with the scheming maybe part of it. You also need to decide if sneaking away will solve your problem, because maybe you think if you go away quietly it'll fix it. It also could deal with gossip, sabotage, and jealousy. So depending on what kind of reading it is, you might interpret it that way. In the traditional Rider-Waite deck, it usually shows somebody leaving a camp with a bunch of swords. He kind of has a smile on his face. He's looking back behind him going, okay, I'm getting away. This has to do with the getting away with something part of it, the sneakiness. This card shows that as well. He's got a big old smile on his face. He's leaving the camp. He's got his swords there with him. So once again, he's getting away with something. He's being sneaky, but it also could be he's clever. If this camp is the enemy, he could be, hey, I took away a bunch of their swords. They're not going to be able to come and fight me and get to my side and hurt us. So it could be a more positive type of energy. This card is a little bit different with what it's showing. It's kind of showing a little bit more of the jealousy type of manifestation of the card. Because there's this woman here, there's swords pointed at this couple here who seem happy. They don't even realize the swords, and it's almost like, yeah, I'm going to get you. And that might be the jealousy part of it. She's jealous of what they have, that kind of thing. So, once again, the cards can be useful in interpreting what you might see. Okay, now the Eight of Swords. As we've mentioned in earlier ones, eights are the infinity symbol turned, the other direction. But in the sword suit, instead of being kind of dealing with enlightenment or spiritual matters that way, because it has to do with your mind, and this suit being so much dealing with in our minds or in our own heads or the way we think. A lot of the symbolisms in it almost always have to do with we're being trapped in our own thoughts or our own minds or what comes up. And this one specifically is we might feel trapped or helpless or powerless or paralyzed, or that we're giving away our responsibility, or that we can't do whatever it is that we're wanting to do, or that our judgment might be clouded. Because remember, this has to do with the way we think about things, so our judgment might not be quite the way it needs to go. So in the sword suit especially, a lot of the numbers almost always have to do with something in our mind going haywire or wacky, or we're, imposing certain thoughts on ourselves. And so in the Eight of Swords, traditionally, they usually have a blindfolded woman with swords stacked up behind her, so she can't really go backwards, but she has the way out to go forwards, but she's blindfolded. So basically, she's feeling trapped, like she can't go anywhere. She might even be able to feel the swords behind her a little bit if she's kind of backed up a little bit. So she thinks she's totally trapped. She thinks she can't go anywhere. But once again, it's in your mind, because as you can see, there is usually a way out. So usually, if they just go forward, they just can't see it. Now, in this one, going forward might also be a little bit of a problem, because she's literally surrounded by all of them. So she really is trapped, more so than in the traditional ones. And in this one shows, a mother, taking care of a little girl who's ill, it looks like. And so this one has a lot of little different connotations to it when it shows up, which is kind of interesting, because it doesn't have as much to do with the judgment or feeling trapped, that kind of thing, but it deals more with, feeling ill and not being able to do what you want, because, she wouldn't be able to get to go out and play or something like that because she is sick. Also, this one, when it pops up in a reading, because she's being nurturing and taking care of the child, sometimes that might be beneficial thoughts in the reading, depending on what the reading's about, what it has to do with. Oops, a little too far there. Okay, the Nine of Swords. Nines are getting towards the completion era. The nines and tens are the completion numbers. But in the Swords suit, once again, we're trapped in our own minds and our own thoughts and our head and what we can come up with. So the nine deals a lot with fear and anxiety and worry, and you're finally at your breaking point. You have gone through so much between the 1 and the 8 that you're just done. You're just like, wow, I can't handle any more. So much has just happened. You might be having nightmares by this point because of all the things that have happened between the 1 and the 8. You might be feeling isolated. You might be haunted by the past, because there's quite a bit of past that's gone on now. Once again, it's another trauma kind of thing, kind of like the Three of Swords. And it also might mean that it's time to learn to ask for help, because it does deal a lot with your anxieties and other things and worry. And I always kind of see this a lot of, PTSD kind of card, that you've gone through so much and you've had so much go on that you're just in a constant state of fear and anxiety and being overwhelmed and having nightmares and that kind of thing. Traditionally, this is shown by somebody sitting up in bed, probably just have had a nightmare. The swords are kind of hanging up over them. So all that anxiety and worry is kind of all right there. A lot like the Swords card, though, is remember, a lot of times that means that a lot of it's in your own head and in your own mind, so it may not be as bad as you think it is. It's just, but it's real to you, and it's very, very serious, and so that's kind of what it kind of depicts is that, you know, but it's still an illusion. It's still not real because it is your own thoughts and feelings. And it might be time to ask for help at this point, because if you're having those kind of nightmares or those kind of fears and anxieties, you might need somebody to ask for help. This one too, you know, she's being chased by birds. She's got swords in her way. She can't go one direction. Once again, that's fear. That's a lot of fear and worry and kind of thing. So that's a little bit more of a real fear, unless it is just kind of a nightmarish thing, like it might be a dream kind of state or sequence. Okay, the Ten of Swords. The Ten of Swords, you're at the completion and the end of the card, so now you might feel like you've been victimized. Or you're at a dead end, you can't go any farther, because it is kind of the ending type of energy. It also could mean that you felt betrayed. You're totally exhausted by this point. You know, you've been having nightmares in the 9, and you can't get any sleep, and you've had all these traumas and other things happen, the 1 through the 9, so now you're just feeling overwhelmed and exhausted, and you can't sleep. You're also kind of in survival mode at this point, because you've just gone on and done so much, you just can't even go forward now. You're just like, okay, you could be at the lowest point of your life. Unforeseen disaster might be coming up, and also it kind of tells us we can't control everything that goes on in our lives. But it also, being the kind of the completion card or towards the end, ends also denote new beginnings and new starts. So it could also mean that you now have a new path forward. You've gone through this path from the 1 through the 10, you've reached that point, now it's time to go on a new path in a new direction. And so much so, when the traditional card, it shows all the swords in a man's back. They're laying there, they've been, you know, pierced, they're dead, pretty much, they're done, they're gone. Different cards have different ones of. This one is like, okay, it's finished, it's done, it's over, they can't fight anymore. This one is also like that, but you notice how there's a wise old owl up in the tree. So it's almost like, okay, they've learned their lessons now. You know, the person you've done the reading for maybe, but it's time to move forward. It's time to go on with what you've learned and go forward. Or this one is, yeah, they're probably dead, but then they still have somebody getting ready to stab them even farther. So it's like, you know, kick them when they're down kind of thing. So these three all have some different symbolisms and connotations to them, depending on which one shows up. And then this one, they have a crow here, you know, which symbolizes the death and the ending. And then there's a graveyard, but it also looks like an older graveyard, like it's an old grave. It's not a fresh grave. So I almost feel like, okay, all of the things of the past are coming up to haunt you. You're thinking about the past, but now it's time to move forward from that, because it's old. It's over now. It's been done for a while. Okay, the Page of Swords. Like all the other face cards, the pages, the knights, the kings, the queens, they always usually are supposed to maybe represent somebody in the reading, or somebody that will show up in the person's life in the reading. What kind of characteristics they have is often what is supposed to be mean, or you just, whatever particular meaning the card might have, you might use in the reading. The pages are all the youthful energy, the young, the excitement, because they're young and they don't know about all the hardships of the world and that kind of thing. So when the pages shows up, they're very curious, and they're funny and witty, and they're chatty, and they're communicative, and they're inspired. Because remember, this is dealing with your idea, things that you can come up with in your mind, you know, light bulb type of moment. They're very alert, they have lots of good mental agility, but they can be kind of scatterbrained, kind of go here, there, everywhere. They're very bright, and they have a lot of nervous energy, and they can be ambitious, because this is the ambitious suit. Now, whenever I think of Page of Swords, I think of Geminis, because that is one of the air signs, and Geminis tend to be kind of that flighty character, kind of that, you know, move here, there, everywhere. Ideas are going really fast, and they talk a lot, and they go very quickly, and that kind of thing. So I always think of kind of them when I think of the pages. Like all the other court cards, it's usually just a page just standing there with a sword, maybe practicing his sword power, or being contemplative like in that one. This one I can get a little bit more meaning out of, depending on when it shows up, because she's actually looking out with her spyglass, and she's got a cannon here. It's winter time, or fall at least, and it looks like she's looking out over the battle and seeing what's going to happen, or maybe looking for people to come back. So you might get a slightly different connotation with this Princess of Swords here rather than these. So It just depends. Okay, now the knight. Now we're going on. The knights are usually the ones that are going to be able to go out and fight the battles or come back with the spoils of war. The swords being the fighter, kind of aggressive kind of energy, these guys are very assertive and direct. They can be very impatient. They're ready to go right now. They're very daring. They're definitely ready to go off and charge with whatever new idea or new thing is started. They can be focused because, you know, this does have to do with focusing your mind. They are sometimes perfectionists, ambitious again, because it is an ambitious suit. They have lots of intellectual energy, and once they get started, there's no stopping them. They're just going to keep going, and they have lots of determination. And like all the other suits, it usually has them on a horse, and they're ready to go out and charge into battle, go forward with whatever idea that they're going out on, and being assertive and ambitious, and just go for it. And so these guys definitely embody that. Okay, now the Queen of Swords. Like all the other queens and kings of all the other suits, they usually have a lot of very good qualities to them because they've reached the top of the suit. The Queen of Swords, she's very honest. She's very independent, because remember, this would be a very independent type of suit. She is very fair, and she gives a lot of constructive criticism, so that's a kind of a skill that she's very good at doing. She can be very objective, so it's good for her to kind of see different sides. No one can trick or fool her, so it's kind of that Ace of Swords energy where you can go through deception and all that. She can definitely do that. She has that ability. She has a gift of judgment for making decisions, and she's an older, wiser, feminine type of energy. Once again, it usually just shows them up on their throne. Sometimes near a precipice. It might have some other symbols, like, you know, this one she's looking kind of wise and judgmental. She doesn't actually have anybody asking her any kind of advice, but she kind of looks like she's ready to impart some kind of knowledge to her subjects with her hand out here. This one, you know, they're in the winter time because this is a winter suit, and she looks very stern, and which is kind of an interesting kind of a depiction of her. And she's just kind of looking out over a kingdom and just kind of being there. So once again, you usually have to, especially the kings and queens, you kind of have to kind of fill out what it might mean based on the type of energy they have for that suit rather than what's symbolized in the cards. Okay, then we got the King of Swords. Now the Kings, he's got a lot of good reason, kind of like the Queen. He's, of course, got lots of authority. He's very disciplined. He has a lot of integrity, a lot of morals, too. And he can be very serious and strict. Because remember, the Swords card kind of has that attitude towards it already, where it's not the playful, joyful, yippee kind of thing. So he can be kind of strict and have a lot of high standards. Very much an authoritarian figure. He has a lot of clear thinking. His power will hold great responsibility for him. And he likes to stick to the facts. You know, Joe Friday, stick to the facts, man. Okay, and usually shows him on his throne once again, just ready to kind of impart knowledge. Nothing really special. This card, it's got his stern look a little bit more than some of the others. But I always kind of see, okay, he's got his book of knowledge here, so he knows something. He's got his knowledge, but he's also sitting by the fire here. And I almost kind of see this figure as being very alone. Whatever's gone on in his life at this point, he's very alone, does not want to get out and mingle with anybody else or do anything else there. But so, can maybe get some slight different interpretations, but for the most part, it's just kind of this stern, wise, very authoritarian kind of figure. Okay, next time we get together, we're going to study the first half of the major arcana and go through each of those cards individually. And I really hope you enjoyed the video, and please remember to give it a thumbs up, and we'll see you for future videos. Bye-bye.